United, as well as other governors general in the Commonwealth, seem to wear this insignia. And it represents, as I'm looking at the release from the Governor General, St. Michael the Archangel as being triumphant over Satan, and Satan is represented as a black man lying on the ground with the Archangel's foot on his head. Have you seen it?
When I saw it, I was totally appalled. I reached out to His Excellency. We had a discussion. His Excellency was equally concerned, and we devised a strategy as to how we would treat with it. And you would have seen the Governor General's statement as a result of that. My own view is that the current sensitivities that prevail are important. I think the reawakening of the consciousness of who we are as a people is very important. And as a government, we are very sensitive to these matters. So the appropriate, we reached out to the appropriate people, and I think they have indicated that certain changes will be made. I don't want to say too much. That is the purview of His Excellency, and I'm certain that he will keep the nation informed as these matters progress. So
King's House statement is a statement sanctioned by Jamaica House?
Well, the head of state is the Governor General. Mm-hmm. I am the head of government. Mm-hmm. So we must respect the position of the head of state. So yes, it is in sync with how we view things.
Right. And even as he petitions UK for perhaps a change in this insignia.
I wouldn't use a petition. We have made our position known.
How have you made that position known? Was there a letter sent?
His Excellency would be the appropriate person to address that. But as I've said, we have done it using the appropriate channels.
No, you have to tell us this. It is so big, Prime Minister. It's a demonstration of what I call institutional racism. And you, as a post-independence leader, the first and only in our history.
Which is why I've crafted it in that way. That I was totally appalled. As I said, when I saw it, you see, the reawakening of our consciousness is very important, because many persons would have seen it. By the way, this is the first time I'm seeing it. Mm-hmm. I've never really examined those emblems, but when I saw it, bearing in mind the consciousness that is now awakened in us, I was appalled, and I called him late at night. And I said, Excellency, have you seen what is being circulated? And he said yes, and we had a conversation about how we will treat with it. And he acted immediately.
Which is what? He said he will seek a revision of the image to the Lord Chancellor of the Order of St. Michael. What does that mean? Has a letter been sent to the Chancellor?
Why I'm being very guarded in what I'm saying is I haven't had an update since he has sent out the release. So he may have sent a letter. I am not sure. So I don't want to comment on what I'm not sure. But what I do know is that he has reached out, whether it is in a letter, a telephone call, I'm not sure. So which is why I can't answer.
And why I'm pressing you on it, Prime Minister, I heard you at one of your press conferences rightly condemn the killing of George Floyd.
Yes.
And I thought that was brilliant. I've heard you condemn the killing of Suzanne Bogle, because the circumstances were just questionable and wrong. So I'm suggesting and asking whether, even though the GG has sent something out, that you being appalled is not sufficient for you to state unequivocally what you suggest is to be done and by what time for us to recommission this particular order.
So I'm stating unequivocally that is inappropriate. And I'm stating it on your program, which is a wide-reaching program. But as I've said earlier, on these matters, we have a head of state. The matter relates to him in particular. My duty would be to speak with the head of state with due respect to the position, and I believe that was done, and the change will be made.
This is a man who never wanted to be a Governor General, never asked himself to be a Governor General, and in fact you did not make the appointment. But part of the reason he is the Governor General is because since post-independent Jamaica, we have not made the changes to remove a representative of the Queen from being the head of state. Are you not ashamed that so many years after, we have not made that move to change the Constitution, remove all of the oppressive signs, symbols from our existence and rewrite the history? And what do you intend to do about it, Prime Minister?
You know, when the matter came up, I got a text message from someone who gave military service to Jamaica. And it was a very useful text pointing out that this was not the only emblem and insignia and so forth that we should change, that we really need to change a lot of the symbols of our nation. And I totally agree with him. He also pointed out that it is not something that you can do overnight, or it is something that has to be thought out very carefully. Mm-hmm. Because as a military man, he was pointing out that, you know, even in the JDF and the JCF, there are certain insignia and symbols that are worn, and all of those would have to be changed. Mm-hmm. They did send me some suggestions as to how they could be changed, what they could look like, and I'm going to pull that file again now that you have raised it, and I'm going to look at it to see whether or not we could do something in short order. But bear in mind, Emily, these things require deep consideration. In fact, it would be a national mobilization about looking at all our symbols. The challenge with everything else is, given what we have to do now, the economic recovery, how do we do it? So what I would say to you, and I would assure the nation, that like everybody else, it is something that I find personally repulsive. It is something that is important to me as a post-independent Jamaican to truly establish who we are as a people. But the conversation has to be done in a very dignified way. We have to do it with great analysis of the past, of our history, so that we get it right the first time we change.
Right. So will you commit that were you to win the election after August 2020, the election you will call for August 2020, will you commit?
I will not say anything.
I'm saying it.
Yes, so that's your date.
Will you commit that in the new term under a JLP administration that you will set in place the appropriate ministry personnel to have a relook at the Constitution, to move us on the path of proper independence that we should have been on since 1962, and to do what you can to have a recommissioning of all of these emblems?
So a lot of these things would require, which is why I'm very guarded, it would require us to have a referendum on some issues.
Yes.
And we have already committed to establishing what we call a grand referendum, because what I'm fearful of is the piecemeal change. You change one thing here, you change another thing here, and I must tell you that some of the things that we have to confront with now are as a result of piecemeal changes in our constitution, where some things don't fit other things, and it creates a legal nightmare. It creates a policy nightmare, which is why I'm saying that if we're going to do this thing, it is not something that you can rush. It's not something that you can do in a haphazard way. It has to be carefully and properly studied. What I can commit to
is to put
the process in place due on certain of these matters that determine what I call the architecture of our nation, the structure of our nation. We didn't do it this term because our focus was on our economic recovery, addressing poverty, and dealing with our national security.
Okay.
And
so
I
you commit to putting in place.
Yes, this is something that I personally am committed to, and I don't think anybody can question it.
All right.
Personally committed.
I have a couple minutes.
Yes.
Wow.